there will continue to be a graveyard full of dead bodies of people who thought realtors were replaceable. I just don't see a near-term future where that takes place. I can never lose sight of the fact that my singular mandate is to make them enough money to where they don't die of infant mortality pejoratively as a business.
Welcome to a private conversation with me, Steve Robbins. I'm sitting down with some of the biggest names in Indianapolis real estate. I've enjoyed these conversations immensely, and I hope you will too. A big thank you to Executive GM Ian Soroyan and his whole team for hosting us at Cunningham Restaurant Group's Commission Row and Mel Speakeasy, located in downtown Indianapolis within the Pacer Sports and Entertainment Complex. Check out the show notes to learn more. And now, my conversation with the Senior Vice President of Industry and Training for Livian, a national expansion operation within Keller Williams, Eric Forney. I was excited to talk to you about some stuff that maybe you don't always talk about.
Okay.
Or you do have content out there. You have your own content out there.
Yep.
How long you've been doing Disruptance now? This is your second or third podcast?
I think so. So run a couple simultaneously. The challenge you find is what you're encountering is the interview style podcasts end up requiring more management, more coordination, more time. The individual podcasts where it's just me ranting and pontificating, that's easier from a time commitment, more challenging on a content creation standpoint. So I've got them both simultaneously, and I would say it's probably run since 2020. In fact, that's what it was. It started in 2020 because I bought a franchise brokerage, and I thought, well, this is interesting. I don't know any of these people. I bought them. You know, when you own a brokerage, you don't really own much in the way of assets.
Right.
You just have the people and hope that they stay, and they don't always. And so I thought, well, how do I set up a way to learn about the people that are in the business that I just acquired? And so starting an internal podcast seemed like a way to give them content and a way for me to meet people. Then challenges happened with the George Floyd incident. And so I went out and said, okay, well, I grew up in an almost all white, area just northeast Indianapolis. Maybe I don't know anything about anything. So reached out and we set up a conversation with three black real estate agents in Indianapolis, and we had great dialogue around it, and that kind of just snowballed into, hey, we should continue to do this. So I guess it's been going on now for a little over 4 years.
So how exactly did the George Floyd incident play into this?
Well, because it was one of those where it was going to initially be an internal podcast, just as a way to try to understand the people that I was in business with. And then it was, hey, maybe I should open up dialogue and open up a platform for real estate agents and myself just to try to learn about what potentially I don't know about, diversity and challenges that I don't face as a white real estate agent or as a white homeowner. It became really just kind of how do we have healthy dialogue around this? And it was fantastic. And then I realized, hey, this is a lot of fun. And it's educational. Let's continue doing it.
What'd you learn from that?
It was interesting. Probably what sticks out to me is, there was had a guy on the show, Mike Scott, who's a black real estate agent locally, owns like the number one black brokerage in Indiana. And, we were going into an Estridge home. And so we walk in, and Estridge had opened up a model up in Westfield for us. And, I just walk right in the door, and apparently I walked into the wrong house. Okay. And I didn't think anything of it. I just opened the door, walked in, no problem. What's interesting, though, is that Mike walked into the wrong house, and he, stopped and then yelled to see if there was anybody else in the home, tried to make himself known. The first thing that went through his head was, you just don't walk into a house.
Right.
In case you might be in the wrong house, something might not go well. That thought never crossed my mind, and candidly doesn't cross my mind. What I realized was that we live the same objective reality, but we live an entirely different perspective reality, because two of the exact same scenarios, two drastically different perceptions of what could go wrong.
Yes.
And so what you realize is that you're now, it's like that adage of you see that, someone's looking down and it's a 6, and somebody looks down and it looks like a 9. we just had a different way of seeing the world because of our shared experiences.
Okay. And so that was an internal podcast that ended up becoming external.
Yep.
And so what prompted that change?
It was fun.
Okay.
And candidly, the challenge with it can be is that when you're who you interview or the conversations that you have matter, and at a certain point in time, it is as kindly as I can be with this, is I just got tired of helping people spell FHA, and so I just didn't want to have some of the conversations anymore. Frankly, I wasn't sure that they were making good content, and it's hard to be motivated and inspired to have a conversation that you don't really want to have a conversation about. So kind of switched to that external podcast.
So you talked about buying the franchise, and then I do want to spit into what you did with that, and then what you're doing with Livian, just to kind of set the stage for where you are right now. And so your current title, I think, is VP of Industry and Innovation.
Yep.
That's a heck of a title.
Yeah, I know. That's what happens when you write your own title and your own job description.
Oh, you did a good job.
Hey, thanks. So it's, it's kind of interesting how kind of give you the brief backstory of it. So, we had been, for whatever reason, real estate sales had come relatively easy to me. A lot of it made sense, and part of it's probably, predates prior experience, and I don't know, I just love the industry and I'm obsessive about it. So that helps. But, we've been the number one KW agent since 2015, started a team in 2017. We were the top KW team in our region. And then, it stayed that way through Indiana. And I thought it was a big deal, right? Like I thought I knew everything about real estate because I had some really quick success. And then I went to a conference, and I think that year I'd sold like 76 houses or something. And I went to a conference, and I remember everyone on stage had sold like 600 houses.
Wow.
And what I realized was I didn't know shit about shit. And I thought that I knew more than I did in reality. And so it was this interesting humbling and broadening of my awareness and what was possible. And as a result, I hired one of the guys that was on stage to be my sales coach and business coach. And 4 years later, he reached out and said, "Hey, Gary Keller and I are in discussion to partner together on this nationwide expansion platform. I don't really know what it's going to be, but I think I'm probably going to need some leadership help. So do you want to do it?" And when given the opportunity to work with a billionaire, I look at it and go, well, am I going to learn something as a byproduct of this that I likely don't know? Am I going to get some exposure and some experience that I don't know? If it fails miserably in a dumpster fire collapse, I can just go back and do what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
So within 30 days or something, it was an easy decision to make that I would partner with the 26 other teams nationally, and then be acquired by Gary in late 2021. And we had no clue what it was going to look like. There was no company name. There was no strategy. I mean, it was, for the most part, an entirely just raw piece of clay that we had to kind of shape and then fire and turn.
And shape into what? What was the vision at the time to shape it into?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. The vision, I would say, was that the industry would consolidate over time as we saw that teams were taking more and more market share from individual agents, that the likelihood would be that there would be what amounts to kind of haves and have-nots. You'd have this like two-class system of real estate where you'd have high-producing individual agents that, but candidly, their moat is well protected because they're typically in good relationship with their database and their past clients and the people that they know. Those people are fairly secure. Then there's everyone else. You've got high-performing teams which gear towards systems and processes that would likely be acquiring those that don't have a moat around their database. So that was kind of the thesis of we'd see consolidations and the teams take on more market share. So let's go what amounts to be almost kind of franchise or license that out nationally to teams who as I'm sure business can be lonely, and leadership, you get all the blame and none of the credit, and sometimes you make money, and sometimes you write checks and don't see it back for a long time, if at all. And so what we believed was that there would be a number of teams who were candidly either not equipped to take on that role of building a large scale team. And then there would be some that just didn't want to do it or were tired of doing it alone. And so, frankly, what we found was there's actually a pretty significant amount of the market that's actually just tired of being the singular person in the boat rowing alone, having late nights with the anxiety around paying bills and, do I have to fire the staff? Can I keep them? They didn't really want to be entrepreneurs. They were accidental business owners as a byproduct of being good at real estate.
And so what they own Keller Williams franchises across the country.
So Livian then basically has an isolated district or a territory. So each Livian team would have exclusivity in their specific market to have an Livian team that they're then able to grow and expand locally.
Okay.
And so we've been, I think we've tripled or so since that initial acquisition in 21.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. We're probably at 80 locations now nationally, and so it's been an interesting experience to do that. Again, I made my own title and made my own job description, and I've done everything from be head janitor to kind of somewhat de facto president of the company at times.
Well, how did it really change what you do day to day from when you owned your franchise, running your own brokerage versus being part of Livia?
A lot, candidly, because I think of it this way: is the brokerage model becomes somewhat of Navy, where we can debate the semantics on it, but in a brokerage, you end up needing head count oftentimes in order to get unit count. Mm-hmm. And so you're looking for typically the most agents you can get into the smallest amount of space to generate the most amount of revenue, because there'll be a 95% fail rate within 5 years of you acquiring them. Whereas on the team side, it becomes more so where you can make more profit with fewer people, but you have to look for the right people, and then you have to be able to keep them, because retention on the team side is only 2.5 years. So you end up looking for a specific person on the team. You're looking for all persons on the brokerage. It ends up being very different conversations. And candidly, like I eventually sold the brokerage because it's a very different conversation. Honestly, probably being the owner of a brokerage was probably the hardest job I've done.
I can speak to that.
Yeah, right. What I do today is difficult, but I enjoy it so much more. So partially why owning a brokerage was difficult was because I didn't enjoy it nearly as much as what I do now.
And what are you doing now?
Well, so I basically lead our 80 team owners across the country. So right now, in this latest iteration of my job and schedule, is every morning I'm teaching basically a business blueprint, how to build a team, how to scale a team, why you do it this specific way, what the trade-offs or consequences are in deviating from that model. So I'm basically doing business blueprint for all of our CEOs every morning. That candidly consumes a ton of time. What I realize, it's our most expensive call in the company. So I have to try to bring the best product possible in order to get the maximum return and to get people to show back up again tomorrow. So that takes a few hours of my day, starting at 5 a.m. right now. And then I do a market and economics and industry hour-long event on Monday afternoons. And then I manage a couple of our departments, education, our database and technology, innovation strategy.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Well,
Are there enough hours of the day?
No, most of the days, no. And that's opportunity to improve for me, candidly, is the improvement piece is delegating more, deciding what matters, what doesn't, or hiring better people.
You mentioned one of those calls is about the market and economics. My background's economics.
Oh, cool.
What are you talking about on that call right now?
Well, right now it's starting to get a little redundant and a little boring because, frankly, it's been consistent for what amounts to be really this year. Short of that NAR settlement, not much market-wise has changed. And candidly, not much market-wise is likely to change. And that could be good or bad, depending on who you are. What the good news is, it should at least create stability for agents to know how to make decisions. And that is, they should be able to understand what to prioritize. And what to prioritize is, funny enough, the same thing that it always has been, which is having conversations with people who may be motivated to move and then willing to hire you. And that job hasn't changed. However, due to the volatility, it's been easy to be distracted as a real estate agent, I think. So, the conversation I'm having right now is interest rates are unlikely to change. And the lack of supply is unlikely to change. There's no simple solution. There's no innovation. Because of that, if you're looking for a silver bullet, it doesn't exist. The only silver bullet is more conversations. How many conversations? The amount necessary to hit your goal. It's kind of like going to the gym, candidly, which is how many hours do you have to spend at the gym to look the way you want to look? I don't know, but the good news is you just know that you have to go. That part's a non-negotiable. You'll figure it out as you begin to get more data and more insights, but what's non-negotiable is the first action that drives everything downstream. So in our business, it's conversations, and in fitness, it's calories.
Yeah. So, yeah, I tend to agree that interest rates at this point look like they're not going to be moving the way that many people here hoped. I also agree that inventory is the primary issue.
Yep.
I do think that if we can get rates even into the mid to low sixes, that we'll get some people that are making the decision not to move because their payment is so nice, and they can get another home that they might want to upgrade, but what they end up saying is that I'm actually going to have to pay more for less of a home. Why would I move?
Correct.
Or the other big issue that I think, if I'm talking to anybody right now, I'm like, and they own a home, why not keep that home and rent it?
Yeah.
You can cash flow and build equity at the same time.
Yep.
This is kind of a one-time opportunity for rates to get into the twos.
Yeah.
You have rates in the twos or threes with the way rent is accelerated at the same, nearly the same pace, not quite as mortgage costs. I mean, it's just, I was just having a conversation with Mike Deck when we were talking about the haves versus the have-nots a little bit. And the people that are locked out because they didn't buy before prices ran away and rates ran away. What are your thoughts on how to help those people?
I mean, candidly, like my initial gut reaction is there isn't a way to help them, but that's actually not true. So what I think about is how I got into the industry was really by accident, and the accident is still available for everyone else, thankfully. The challenge we have as an industry is right now there's about 2,200 programs, grants, incentives to lower the cost of housing nationally for home buyers. As real estate agents and as a government, I would say we do a really poor or below poor job of educating the consumer on all of the available ways that they could access home ownership and do so affordably. Today you could buy in Indianapolis with $0 down and 0 PMI. That was the loan that I used in order to acquire real estate and then to build wealth with. That then was the catalyst for me to build a business. I don't know what my life looks like if I don't get access to those products that become the lever to acquiring assets, that become the lever to acquiring wealth, which then creates the stability to build a business to be able to take risks if necessary. So thankfully, there's, like I said, just shy of 2,300 programs available today. As an industry, we just have to do a better job of educating the consumer on what is available. If I'm the consumer, I'm going to then realize my job is to find out what I can qualify for, what's available to me, and then how do I look at the two most expensive things that I can do in my entire life, which is marry the wrong person or pay taxes, right? So if I get married and there went half of the house, we just sell that thing in half and give it to whatever my former partner, and then taxes, could be anywhere up to 43.5% or so here in Indiana. If I can mitigate those two really expensive costs while leveraging the available programs that might be available either through the city or even through the federal government, that's the way that I get access. I have to change all the pieces on the chessboard in order to make the math work for what my scenario is. Because once you get your foot in the door, literally and figuratively, it gets easier.
Yes.
But you've got to get the first domino knocked over in order to get the access to the rest of the wealth building. Because, if you look at it and just say, okay, well, we've seen over the past 40 years, we've seen prices appreciate at like 5.4% or something. And you just do the math on a $500,000 house appreciating at 5%. That means a year from today, that house will have gone up $25,000 in equity. So that homeowner now increased their net worth $25,000. If that homeowner makes $75,000 a year, the wild thing is that 1/3 of their entire annual income was made in asset value or net worth appreciation while they slept.
Yep.
And so it is truly, it's not as simple as people make it when they think about it's not rent versus ownership. Because when you realize that you're getting the compounding of the 5%, this is kind of wild. I just looked at this yesterday. It's 30 years from today, so 3 decades from now, at this current trajectory, you would see that home prices in Indiana would be $1.4 million on average. And that absolutely blows people's mind, because there's no way that people would actually believe that the home that they live in might be on the market or might be valued in their neighborhood at $1.4 million for the typical homeowner. And yet that's how the compounding of the appreciation works. So it's not rent versus own.
Well, you're keeping up with inflation.
Essentially. You're just mildly outpacing it by 2%.
Right.
So if you don't get access, you're not only not keeping up with inflation, but you're also not getting whatever the appreciation is off the top.
Yeah. The people that's how you build wealth. That's the easiest way to build wealth.
It's the easiest thing, for sure.
I'm not sure we've figured out anything here today, but getting the house.
We still have time.
We do have time, but how we're going to help the people that aren't already get in. You mentioned some programs, but with the prices and the rates being what they are, and it really, particularly in Indianapolis, where there's a lot of competition for the first-time home buyer. Mm-hmm. And there just isn't that many houses, and the builders even don't build first-time home buyers very often anymore. When we first started our company, we were practically solely working with first-time home buyers.
Yeah.
And, there was all kinds of options.
Yeah.
But now the entry point just is running farther away.
Yep.
Multifamily is just becoming a thing in Indy, but go ahead.
Yeah, the thing about it is, I hate to sound like an old man, but, back in my day, I worked 2 jobs I had $8,500. I bought a house with mold so that I could buy my first house, right? That was going to be my way out of selling paint. And, I was working at Sherwin-Williams, and I wanted something more for myself. And like a arrogant 25-year-old, I thought for sure that I could just flip real estate. It's 2009, so I don't flip. That one flops, but nonetheless, it's $8,500 up front to buy that. I'm working from 7 a.m. to 8, 9, 10 p.m. fairly consistently in order to eventually get ahead. And I wouldn't trade that for anything at this point in time. Did it suck at the time? Sure, but I'm 25 years old. that was probably better than any other alternative. So if I don't own, I've got to figure out is my focus has to be on wealth accumulation, because what I need to do is think long term about how do I preserve either my family, my own safety and longevity, and whether we like it or not. Unfortunately, acquiring assets, it's the way that you, oddly enough, just so happen to live longer as well. So the it's kind of wild, but the number one determiner of your net worth is the zip code that you were born in, and then the number one determiner of how long you live is your net worth. And it shouldn't be that way for either of those two statistics, but it is. When we accept the fact that it is, then you go, okay, well, what do I have to do in order to ensure that I live the longest by accumulating the most assets, the most income, enough to at least be fiduciary to myself and my family.
You were working 7 a.m. to 9 or 10 p.m.?
Yeah.
1 or 2 jobs?
2.
And what were those?
Yeah, so I was working at Sherwin-Williams, really sexy job. I was working the paint counter there as a store manager for Sherwin-Williams. Did that for 8 years. And then I would do basically like side work for contractors or for customers, oftentimes in the evening.
Are you a workaholic?
Yes, probably. Mm-hmm.
Why?
It's a great question. Frankly, I think I enjoy it. I love to learn, and work feels like play and like problem solving. And so because of that, I mean, to this day, I still work 7 days a week. And it's not because I have to. Frankly, it's really because I want to. Now, some days I want to work less than others, but...
Is that happening more or not really?
I think today it happens...
How old are you?
40.
Okay.
So
happy birthday.
Thanks. So I think it happens the days that I don't want to work today, or because what I do is so different. I'm really working right now on this stage of a lot of like content creation, and a lot of, because I'm doing that business blueprint, it is really mentally taxing, because I'm trying to show up and perform, and deliver the best product consistently, and I'm starting at 5 a.m. and that shifted my schedule earlier than it had been. And so with that change, plus the fact that I'm mentally trying to create, an hour-long market economics and industry event on top of this business blueprint every morning, the days that I don't work are the days that my brain just needs the day off to TikTok or something. I'm not dancing those, Steve. You can't follow me on there.
What time are you going to bed if you get up at 5?
Not early enough.
Do you feel sleep deprived?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't.
You're just a guy that doesn't need that much sleep?
Seems that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fortunate.
Yeah. I don't know if it's always been that way, but last night I went to bed at 11:45. I just happened to look at my watch this morning when I was logging everything, and I got 4 hours and 52 minutes.
Okay.
So for some reason that, 4:50 or whatever, I woke up before my alarm went off and was awake, and
you're up.
Then
So I recognize that you have, from what I do know about you and what I have watched and read over the time that I've been in real estate, and you've been back or been kind of in the mix here with becoming really, and I've seen you position yourself, and I think I would agree with this, of being a thought leader, of being someone who's looking towards the future.
Yeah.
And what do you think about our industry in the next 5 years? What can you share with me that you feel strongly about, and then things maybe you don't feel quite as certain of, but you do think that they're going to happen?
So I feel really strongly that consumers will still hire real estate agents. I feel very strongly about that component. And I don't know that was always something that I felt convicted over. The more that I've expanded and seen the way that the business looks nationally through multiple lenses, through the relationships that I have with vendors, through people who've been with some of the largest startups in the country and our industry is. What I tell you is there's a graveyard full of companies who thought they could put real estate agents out of business. And the only ones who were out of business were those who thought they could put real estate agents out of business. That trend will continue. There will continue to be a graveyard full of dead bodies of people who thought realtors were replaceable. I just don't see a near-term future where that takes place for a number of reasons. So that's kind of my most strongly held conviction that probably I've really changed on. Then, I think that if we see no changes to this NAR settlement based on the way that it's currently been drafted, and we anticipate that it'll go into place, that we as real estate agents, we to some degree, we need to get our shit together. All you have to do is look at the comment section on any social media platform to see that there's plenty of uninformed and uneducated and quite possibly uninterested real estate agents. And I don't say that as a attack on the industry, because I couldn't be more passionate about what I do. In fact, I actually think that that most are so wildly uneducated on what NAR does for the industry and for their livelihood and for the country, that they're doing themselves, their customers, and the country a disservice.
What do they misunderstand?
Well, what they, don't realize is it's $156 a year. I don't know what you get for $156 a year that's supposed to be life-altering, right? Like right now, Disney Plus costs more than NAR dues. So what's fascinating to me is when you read agents who are like, NAR sold us out, or NAR realtor lawyers suck. There's all kinds of they're going to raise our dues. You're like, dude, you pay $156. If that's going to put you out of business, like, let's just get there first. Let's just accelerate it, save everybody the time, and just leave now. But so one is they don't realize that it costs almost nothing. Two, they don't realize that NAR has largely been a lobbying organization on behalf of real estate agents, but more importantly on behalf of property rights and on behalf of home ownership as a country. And so it's easy to do little to no research and think that lobbying organizations are bad. And that's probably a good assumption a lot of times. In this instance, what you realize is they're lobbying for the federal government to continue with, flood insurance support from federal government. They were just writing for the Supreme Court, who the state of Minnesota had taken an 83-year-old woman's house from her. It was worth $40,000. She had fallen behind on taxes. They took her equity and her house. NAR filed on behalf of that Supreme Court case that thankfully 13 states were taking people's equity and their homes. And so NAR took up a property rights case. They've been fighting the EPA on a number of issues where the EPA said, hey, your area gets standing water, your property gets standing water. So now that area is now federally, it's part of our federal oversight. And so they've fought for individual property rights in the Supreme Court and with Congress. And, you look at it and say, okay, well, what did they do for me personally? Well, as a real estate agent, if no one's lobbying and fighting for homeowners and protecting the rights of a democracy, arguably you don't have a democracy, which means we have bigger issues as real estate agents. And so, NAR does, I think, what amounts to be a lot of good things. They're a terrible marketing organization. They do a poor job of communicating what they do well to the members, like ourselves.
How do you see them evolving through everything we're going through?
Frankly, they've evolved so much over the 100 years that we've gotten here. The real estate transaction is just a giant Jenga tower, in that when you move one of the pieces, there are these opposite unintended consequences, like the settlement, which exposes veterans, minorities, and first-time buyers, and those that are struggling with down payments. It's significantly harming that subset of the population from being able to have professional representation. And so
it's making it that much harder for
That's people. Right. That's right. You're pulling up the ladder absolutely behind you. And And so you look at NAR and you say, well, they're going to have to adapt. Do I believe that the terms of the settlement will last in perpetuity? No. And I say that because I believe that eventually the country gets it right. And we'll either get it right by reversing some of the ladder pull up that we've done to veterans and to low income would-be buyers. We'll figure out a way to fix that, whether that's loan product or through repeal of some of the settlements. But candidly, I think NAR has adjusted so much over time. They'll adjust to this and continue, but none of which will be substantive.
So back to kind of what you said in the industry for the future.
Yeah.
Outside of maybe NAR and Disruptance, how much of that's about tech? Your podcast called Disruptance. How much is that about tech versus other areas of whether it's competition?
So from a tech standpoint, the interesting thing is right now there's very little technology that is promising. What we're really doing is shaving off these like micro portions of the transaction. So as I've kind of mapped the workflow or the transaction cycle out, what you realize are the constraints are the physical constraints. And so they're typically on the front end of somebody has to call a real estate agent and have that intake, needs analysis, discovery, conversation. You could probably leverage that out to AI, assuming the consumer's willing to. Then you've got the showing portion and the buyer consultation portion. Those are two components that are physically constrained by time and by people or by travel. You've got that showing part takes the most time by far. That technology today just candidly can't disrupt. I don't believe that people will choose to put on a heavy headset and decide to walk through digitally into some virtual space and pretend that they don't give a damn about whether the cat pissed on the baseboards and whether there's stains on the carpet. I don't live in that world, and so there are all these physical constraints, and we can shave off some of the time components of it, but the work is still the work.
Yes,
and the work is right now. There's no real innovation that's changing that, and I'm not sure if there is the ability to change that. It's possible that what we could see post-settlement is that might be the more disruptive. Is my concern is if there's a trend that we see buyer agent commissions being not offered or offered less by sellers or by agents who don't understand the consequences of that, because unfortunately there are plenty of those, then what it's not going to do is harm the cockroaches. Okay, so it's not the cockroach agent will absolutely still survive. The top tier agent will survive. It's actually the ones in the middle who are most harmed, potentially. So I say cockroach agents.
How do you define that?
So if there's 1.5 million real estate agents, roughly, about 750,000 licensed realtors sold 0 houses last year. Okay, so you can't put someone out of business who was never in business. It just happens to be fundamentally impossible. Those cockroaches who have 750,000 members who sold $0, generated $0, they can't go backwards. They've already demonstrated that after a Holocaust worth of economic zero, they will survive. So if the entire marketplace dynamic changes, so what? It doesn't impact them. They've already made zero. They can't go anywhere else. So, because truthfully, many of them are not actually practicing real estate agents or attempting to practice. They're paying members for a reason. So you've got then top tier, and you've kind of got what amounts to be middle tier. Let's call that the agent who's doing 8% of realtors did 8 units last year. So last year's numbers were highly skewed, but let's call it the 12-unit producer. 12 to 15. That's their sole income. They probably earned 65 to 85,000. If we see commissions compress on them by 20%, what starts to become at risk is whether their life style could actually take a 20% compression. And so my concern is actually for those agents in the middle who are making enough to pay their bills, but they have very little margin of safety. If we see the trend where agents aren't able to negotiate or advocate for co-op commission, it's going to really impair those agents in the middle. I don't mean this with, I don't actively sell real estate personally, but like it wouldn't impact me.
Right.
And that's because I know how I would adapt. It's going to really impair those in the middle who frankly are good fiduciaries. They want to do good work for the consumer. They care. They attempt to provide a great service. For whatever reason, they might have time constraints. They may have skill set constraints. They may have longevity constraints where they're just not able to do 30 to 50 units for whatever reason. Those are the ones that are that I'm most concerned with if we see some of that compression. So that I think is the most interesting thing to watch, because what happens then is now you distribute the same amount of demand across fewer agents, which might be worse for the consumer because the cockroaches aren't going to service it. We know that. They won't. So now we've got 5 million consumers across fewer practicing agents, if that's the case. And that's the thing that you could see service quality start to go down if that happens.
And so what do you think we can do to help those middle tier? What can they do?
That's a good question. Build
their moat.
Yeah, and frankly, that's probably the most difficult project in the industry, frankly. Basically, the data tells us that if a real estate agent survives to year 6, they survive as long as they choose. As I like to call the infant mortality rate. So the infant mortality of a baby ages 0 to 5 is really high. That's the most vulnerable phase. After you get to year 6 as a newborn,
I've heard this analogy, but I really think it's appropriate.
After you get to year 6, you what's odd is even in humans, our life expectancy actually goes up by 10 years once you get to 5 years old. Okay. Now, interestingly, in World War I, what they found was the majority of fighter pilots were shot and killed within their first 30 days of deployment. If they survived to day 30, they were likely coming home from World War I. And real estate is similar. So if you survive to year 6, you survive as long as you choose. It's getting to year 6 that's the problem. And the number one reason why real estate agents go out of business is they don't make enough money to stay in business. And so, candidly, the way to help all of them get to the ability to stay is to get them so narrowly focused on income instead of everything else. And so part of the challenge, as you know, as a brokerage owner, is you still have to do everything else, but you'll lose all of them if they don't generate enough revenue. So, you go, okay, how do I manage their risk? How do I help them write contracts? How do I educate them on these items? But I can never lose sight of the fact that my singular mandate is to make them enough money to where they don't die of infant mortality pejoratively as a business. And so the hard part is that our industry is really loud about everything other than selling real estate. And so
what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, if there's all this money thrown at everything that other than having conversations with people who want to buy or sell real estate. So there are distractions around the latest technology company. There's distractions around interest rates, the economy. There's distractions around the election. There's should I do newsletters? What should I say in my newsletters? Should I host events? Should I door knock, open house? The answer is yes. And all of them work and none of them work. What will work is if you realize that the conversations have to occur. The method by which you have the conversation is a choice, but what's non-negotiable is the conversation must take place. How do you get the conversations? Really doesn't matter, actually. You just have to ensure that it happens. And so our industry loudly talks about everything else because, frankly, you couldn't get people to subscribe to Inman if every day all they put out was another real estate agent has a conversation with a consumer who wanted to buy and sell real estate. that's a pretty shitty magazine headline. And so what happens is they write about everything else because the job is attention and distraction. And so as an industry, we have to, as leaders in industries, we have to always be refocusing that laser on, if you don't sell, you will not stay. Everything else is everything else. That's probably the singular battle that I fight on a daily basis.
Commission Row offers an unforgettable dining experience with high-quality steaks, a raw bar, and exquisite seafood curated by an expert culinary team. The menu, designed to delight every palate, features seasonal ingredients paired with an extensive wine and spirit selection. Open weekdays from 4 p.m. and for brunch at 10 a.m. on weekends. Continue the evening at Mel's Speakeasy below. After dining, enjoy an after-dinner drink with a wide selection of wines, cocktails, and spirits. Open daily from 5 p.m., Mel's is perfect for relaxing and unwinding. Commission Row and Mel's Speakeasy, an unforgettable dining experience awaits. In coaching of agents, myself personally, almost always the topic of conversation is how many real estate conversations are you going to have?
Yeah.
How have you helped agents have more real estate conversations? Because I couldn't agree with you more. That's where the goal is.
I like to think about real estate that it's like pizza and sex. I just haven't found anyone who doesn't enjoy either of those three topics, frankly. And so I find that, unlike one of the three, real estate is pretty easy to talk to with everyone. Because at the end of the day, what you realize is, even if it's a tree in the park, everyone lives somewhere. So it becomes easy to realize then that my job is just to merely have real estate conversations, and my target audience is everyone. Because if I'm just asking a question around their current living scenario, where do you live? Do you like where you live? Do you own? Do you rent? It doesn't really matter. I'm just going in from a curiosity perspective.
That's great in its simplicity.
Yeah. And so the challenge becomes is that as agents, we oftentimes get confused and thinking that it's complicated. It really is not. It is purely a natural conversation where you're remaining curious and then asking questions. And if I ask them about that specific living situation, eventually I get to decide whether I'm going to talk about what I do or whether I remain in curiosity around what they do. And if all I did was go to the mall every day and talk to people about their current living scenario, that would be sufficient. Because frankly, that's not all that much different than door knocking, which is not all that much different than circle prospecting, which is not all that much different to open houses. The only difference is where someone is in the intent funnel. Right? So if I talk to strangers, they're unaware and uninterested. But if I talk to someone at an open house, my odds are that they're mildly more aware and mildly more interested. I just don't know where on that continuum they are. So my job is just to turn over as many rocks by way of conversation to try to find someone who's motivated to buy or sell and willing to do it with me.
And what's your data been telling you on how many conversations someone has to have?
It's kind of funny. I actually don't have that data, and here's why. For whatever reason, we've actually only ever really focused on appointments, and that's largely because I just got tired of nannying. I just didn't want to build my entire career out of, did you have phone conversations? Because this is an interesting one. At one point in my career, I realized that I used to ask everyone on the team, we used to basically drill phone calls into them. And I still think that it's probably a good strategy. However, we know that the answer rates are mixed and at best, right? I mean, we're seeing right now 15% answer rate. And so there's a lot of dials for few conversations. But what's interesting, I had an agent who just wouldn't answer the phone. She was great person, great agent. She's kind of like the mascot. Everybody loved having her on the team. She didn't sell a lot. She wasn't in the starting lineup necessarily, but she's a lot of fun and she was good culture. One day I finally went to her and I realized, hey, what if I just told you just never had to make a phone call ever again? And she's like, are you serious? She just got so excited. She's like, are you being serious? I said, well, you're not doing it now. So I might as well give you permission to not do what you're not doing. And I said, okay, cool. Now we got that over with. now, where did the last 5 closings that you had come from? And what we found was they were from events that she would go to a Pacers game or something like, and meet somebody at the game, socializing, and they would express some interest, or they knew somebody who had interest in buying or selling real estate. And what's wild is she ended up selling 44 houses in the next 12 months, which was way more than what she had done previously, probably her entire career combined. But I gave her permission to change the method in which she delivered the message. And so I think the number is less important than it is figuring out what method will you do consistently in order to message the message you need to enough people to make a decision about real estate. And for some people, it's phone calls. For others, it's open houses. Like I worked 63 open houses the last year I was selling, and I got 3 transactions from it. You could make a pretty good argument that says that was a pretty shitty use of my time, because it's 3 hours an open house, 3 closings. Probably could have used 180 hours more effectively, which is kind of an interesting thing where I was selling, I don't know, 11 a month or something on average. You're like, gosh, I did an open house, 63 open houses, and got 3 transactions from it. So it was a terrible ROI, but I find agents doing that because they were told that that's the ideal method for them to prospect. When the truth is, what they should do is what they would do on when it's difficult and on a day when they don't feel like doing it. Is what would you do then? That's probably the ideal way to target your conversations.
Mike, I guess my question to you on this is, from an accountability perspective, what is it that you've seen that works with agents? Because I think really accountability has been the hardest thing, I would say, for an agent to really, they wake up and they can make a decision whether they're going to work or not. And no one's really, unless they're on a type of team where someone really is holding them accountable. How are you seeing success with agents that are struggling to have accountability for themselves?
Well, that becomes the challenge of being an individual agent, frankly. And I don't want to talk my own book because that disingenuous, but that is, I am a personal trainer because I won't be accountable on my own. So I have that awareness. I show up every morning because I'm accountable to our national network of CEOs, that if I don't do my job, or if I do my job poorly, then I deprive them of that experience. So if I'm an individual agent, I'm going to find somebody else that I can co-op accountability with, whether that's another agent in the office, it's a production group that I'm a part of, it's a coach, it's a managing broker. If I'm an individual agent, I'm going to find somebody I can co-op that with. From a team standpoint, and when I look at teams across the country, funny enough, the data says that NAR puts out consistently is, 7 out of 10 consumers hire the first agent they meet. The devil they know is better than the devil they don't know. Right. And so assuming that you didn't totally, piss them off and scare them away, 7 out of 10 times a consumer hires the first agent they meet, which means showing up is 70% of success. So for us as a team, then we have all our agents show up at 9 a.m. on a Zoom or in person. It's 10, 15 minutes. They make a commitment about their activity, about their result that day, and then they make a review of what their result was yesterday. At this point in time, I don't really talk about it because I'm not there to judge what they committed to yesterday and what they did. Every day I don't do exactly what I said I was going to do. The exercise is making commitments, reviewing commitments, not being judged for the commitment. And so we do that, and then my goal then is to teach them something in the next 15 minutes of our time together. But the layer down from that then, as I go kind of in this business blueprint, is that as a team owner, my responsibility is to go through their pipeline on a weekly basis. So, Steve, your goals are 36 houses. That you're going to close 36 houses this year. Great. I think you could sell 36 houses by June. What would you have to do, Steve, in order to sell 36 houses by June? You're going to tell me whatever that is. What I really want you to do is stretch your thinking so that you can get outside of the linear bubble and get into thinking exponentially. Then we're going to get into, okay, great. So then what did what were your results last week? And you were going to tell me whatever your results were. Great. So you're either on track or you're off track. If you're off track, the gap is 3 units. Steve, it looks like you're off track by 3 units, which means we're going to need to get 3 additional people in the pipeline this month. Is 3 additional people in your pipeline this month something you're committed to? Yes, no, whatever it is. Okay, awesome. So who are those 3 people that you need to prioritize in order to move forward in the decision-making phase to so that you stay on track for your goals? If for some reason you don't hit your goals, what happens? If that happens, then what happens? Do you want to tell your family, or would you prefer that I tell your family? And so it's my responsibility or someone's responsibility to go through that conversation on a weekly basis. And there's not much intensity to it at this point, though. I probably used to be much more intense about it.
Okay.
And
what changed?
I've started to realize that there are comma problems and there are decimal problems. And what I mean by that is that, there's never a shortage of problems. To be alive is to have problems. The only people that don't have problems are dead people. And so what I've realized is that every business has the problems. I get to choose whether I put my intensity onto commas or decimals. And so the comma problems would be whether we're going to get sued and go out of business, whether we do an acquisition of another agent or another company.
Don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And yet I have to know what is small and what's not. And so I think that accountability doesn't need to be a place of judgment or a place of intensity. The success is actually in making the commitment and then reflecting on the results or the actions and the commitment. That typically alone is usually enough to cause some change of behavior. Or, eventually, if you showed up at the gym and you didn't work out, but tomorrow you showed up at the gym and you didn't work out, and you showed up and you didn't work out, eventually you'd stop either going to the gym or you'd decide to work out. And so the goal is just to create that repetition of mere result.
You mentioned AI a little while ago, and I've heard from multiple people that you delve pretty deep into it. I subscribe to probably 5 or 6 AI podcasts.
Yeah.
I subscribe to probably 7 or 8 AI newsletters. I'm paying attention on what's happening. My business partner, Chris Kukulhan, is working in what's happening every day, using it to build a better platform for us to have our own chatbot type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How are you leveraging AI? What are you seeing with AI? We can talk about the ethics of AI.
Yep.
We could talk about just AI with regard to real estate, but I'm a little bit more curious at just AI and how you see it affecting humanity in the future. What I would tell you, and I think you'll agree with me, is that I don't think most people have any idea how fast it's coming.
No, they absolutely don't. What's still wild is the number of people who aren't using that.
True.
And which is insane, by the way, because, given the choice of continuing to type into Google or to use the most intelligent innovation in human history, why continue to put shoes on the horse? I don't quite understand, but something like 80% of the population is still not even using AI, which is bonkers. But when we look out at our industry, I think our industry is one thing. Let's attack that, and then let's attack society. So as an industry, candidly, there's really a few ways that we could see it start to come into play. Some that will have an impact, some that probably won't. There's a lot of distraction, a lot of noise, a lot of decimal point problems that people are trying to solve inside with AI. For instance, and again, we have this internally, but listing descriptions. Okay, total decimal point problem. Most consumers don't read the shit to begin with, okay? So that's one use case of AI that will impact the industry, but in an inconsequential way. The ones that are interesting are voice to voice calling. both from an inbound concierge standpoint and from a prospecting standpoint, and of course in a TCPA compliant way. And so voice AI is probably going to be arguably the most impactful. What will be interesting to see is how will the consumer react if voice calling becomes mainstream and widespread. Will answer rate diminish even more? What we found in doing that is, again, we've worked with it quite a bit, and it's arguably much more effective than a human version. If you ask me today, would I go hire an ISA? No. Would I hire a department of ISAs? Hell no. Would I be willing to utilize AI for both text messages and voice? If it were in a TCPA way, of course, I would. I think that's probably the most impactful that we would see it show up. There's some interesting AI plays around inspections. When you think about some of the constraint that we have in the real estate process is on pricing and repairs. And that process can drag on for weeks sometimes. And so being able to accelerate the
How do you see AI helping there?
Well, so right now there's some interesting options where you could take photos and then you can get estimates within a matter of seconds. You could take photos and you could get analysis on what repairs may or may not be needed as well. So leveraging it to shorten the pricing challenge around going out and physically doing a roof inspection would be one option. And then the second would be do the repairs need to exist at all? We could start to actually have an intelligent conversation that is much more improved than inspection dad, right? Because there's nothing worse than inspection dad. And so we could start to eliminate that guy or the inspector who fear mongers around change by actually compiling a big database for
those dads are still going to show up.
I know they are. They're still going to ruin everyone's experience. But those two I think are interesting. It's possible that I think everything else is margins, because short of agentless showings or on-demand showings, there's very little work that can be stripped out of the process that is not still largely going to be touched by humans, because frankly, I believe that we as a society want someone to be involved. And I think a living example of that is that my wife and I, we need to file a new will and estate plan, and candidly, that can just be written for free with AI today. I know that.
Yep.
That part's easy. And we're hiring an attorney to do it. And we're hiring an attorney to do it because peace of mind. And it's not because I expect actually a different or a better product. I will sleep better believing that I've had the ability to have dialogue with someone who does it for a living, despite the fact that I know quantifiably that I probably would get a better product or an equal product with AI. I'm still going to pay for someone to do it.
Yeah, the emotional intelligence part of being a professional, whether it's in a service industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Have you seen Hume? Are you familiar with Hume AI?
I don't think so.
So it's an empathic AI.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I did see this one. Yeah.
You're talking, and it's very interesting because and what's cool about it is you're seeing basically wavelengths that are showing different colors and different percentages of what they're detecting in your voice.
Yeah.
And from an emotional perspective.
Yeah.
And so you're seeing 2-3 different emotions that are coming from you while they're interpreting what you're saying, and then the response back.
Yeah.
It's also sharing what kind of emotional response they're using and talking to you. It's pretty amazing.
It is. I would, frankly, I'd love to be, somebody who's just starting in our industry or just starting a business that I could utilize AI. I think the trajectory that you could build with AI today is I think someone could build a similar success to what I've had or to what others who you've talked with have had, just by having better intelligence than what we had when we started. And things that have taken me almost a decade to learn, I could type in and get the access to that information today that you couldn't find really anywhere else, short of paying tens of thousands of dollars to go to conferences, to get in rooms with enough people, the right people, consume podcasts, read books. To some degree, I don't do any of that really anymore. I can access it on demand. The cool part to me about AI is it's kind of what social media has done for free speech, good or bad. It's democratized reach with freedom of speech. I think AI democratizes intelligence, and that should be the most inspiring component of it. There certainly are risks, but the ability to significantly improve your intelligence, your product, and the learning curve as a society, I think is pretty awesome.
Let me ask you this. My youngest son, his name's Kane. He just accepted his offer to Florida, University of Florida. He's going to be in their business school, and he committed a couple weeks ago, probably about a year ago, because he knows I'm paying attention to AI, and I'm forwarding all three of my kids AI crap all the time. And I don't know how much they're ever reading it, but they know it's important. And he's a smart kid. He does well. He's motivated. He's ambitious. But he said, Dad, how am I going to compete? Or what's going to make the difference in competition? How am I going to... This was essentially his question. How am I going to win when AI levels the playing field?
Maybe
do you have any thoughts on that?
I mean, the reality of it is that here's the good news is intelligence has never been a singular indicator of success or net worth. In fact, most of the data shows us that if you're the most intelligent from an IQ standpoint, you actually end up earning less than people who are in the second tier of intelligence. So intelligence alone is not enough to determine success or determine outcomes. It becomes one where I think you match passion, you match situational awareness, pattern recognition, emotional intelligence, you match your network, and then you take intelligence and use that as a component of your success. But it's certainly not the singular determiner of success, because if it were, then today, frankly, those that were using AI the most would be having the most success. And there's not a direct correlation to that.
Yeah. Yeah, my answer was essentially, I think, and I'm speculating, is that it'll come down to desire. If everyone basically has,
for sure,
not omnipotence, but maybe omniscience at their fingertips, it's going to come up. Who gets up in the morning and says, I need to go do this, which is, for the most part, still the way the world is. Everyone just has a tool to help them get there, but
totally
leverages the tools.
Correct. Which is no different today than how much of the intelligence that we do have, or much of the innovation that we have, is it a lot of times comes down to how you leverage it, how frequently you do. But, frankly, there are a lot of industries where AI will have little to no impact as well. So if I'm him and I'm going to school for business, and I'm genuinely concerned about it, and if I'm passionate about an industry where AI will do little disruption, might be a good opportunity to explore those. There are a ton of industries where you can make a hell of a career and a ton of income that AI won't touch anytime soon.
What do you think AI is not going to touch soon? No, I'm not sure about
plumbing, electric, how we build houses, despite the fact that it should. I don't know that the consumers are ready for it. It's unlikely to impact moving. Anything that still requires the physical component of it, it will start to save time in the margins or efficiency in the margins, but not in the most critical, important components of it, which is the physical nature of the work itself. So for the most part, a lot of those physical. I mean, just think about moving, for instance. I don't want to go pack and pick up boxes and couches. However, I might be willing to own a company where people pack and move and ship boxes, because the likelihood of having robotics and AI pack and ship your house and load it onto a truck and stack it and we're a long way from that. Doesn't mean that we're not eventually.
How far is a long way from that?
Probably 15 years. I think we'll have the capability to do that sooner. I think the mainstream adoption happens much slower than what we think, because probably the task-specific robotics will likely be more cost prohibitive for most than it's worth the investment in. And then there's going to be a lot of logistics to make up. Just think how long Tesla's been working on self-driving. I mean, gosh, that was supposed to have come out in 2015, I think. It was kind of when they started talking about it. I'm still unconvinced that it's fully sufficient by 2025. So at least it's 10 years to
it's
get...
not going to be fully sufficient.
Right?
But
so
the thing about self-driving that I don't think people think about too much is what it really works is when it's not each car with its own brain, but every car is on the same network. Mm-hmm. And so they can all think, what's the most efficient way to do this, do that? And they're talking to each other.
Yeah.
And there's essential, so you're already on that page, but a lot of people aren't thinking about that. They're just thinking about their own car and not having to drive, but it's the network is the power.
Well, I mean, and I love, like, this is super nerdy, but I love driving as an interesting example of business. I find that it's fascinating, is that somehow we all get in a car behind the wheel, and what could be one of the most dangerous or deadly things we could do every day. We have no ability to communicate voice to voice, face to face with anyone else on the road. And yet millions of people do it every day at physics that would cost each of us our life if something went wrong. And somehow we're able to work together effectively without communicating, because we all ascribe to one singular, widely accepted rules of engagement.
Yeah.
And once we accept that this standard is the standard and none of us deviate from it, and when we do, we typically give each other the forgiveness and the acceptance and the tolerance to realize that if someone cuts you off in traffic, it was because there was probably some reason why. We give grace. In business, we oftentimes don't apply that same model to almost all of our internal dynamics, and we certainly don't apply it to our system dynamics. I think it's just fascinating that our entire way of life, what we do most commonly, we do it without communicating, and we all do it wildly safely in the most dangerous thing we can do. And business should operate similarly. It doesn't, oftentimes because we don't apply a similar mindset to it.
So I asked you earlier, about why you're a workaholic.
Yeah.
What really is your why for what you're going to do next in life and what's important to you at this point?
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I've never been really good at answering that question. What's my why?
Okay, good.
So maybe you can help me out here.
No,
do you have a why?
I don't. I really don't. Candidly, I don't. I don't. And I struggle with the belief that one is necessary, frankly.
Okay.
My 6-year-old wakes up every day and he doesn't have a why for why he plays with his toys and why he does things that he enjoys doing. He does them because he wants to, and it's fun for him. I don't see why business should be any different. I don't see why life as an adult should be any different than it was as kids. When we realize that some things are true and will always be true, and then outside of that are things that we can that are malleable. And what I mean by that is that as an adult, I have to accept that I have responsibilities. If I want to exist in the world the way that it is, I have to generate a certain amount of money, and I have to pay for things if I want to keep them. And some of the pleasures of life must be maintained by way of making money. Until I decide to live on a park bench, those truths will remain constant. Now, what do I want to do? Realizing that I have to make enough money to provide for those fundamental truths. For me, thankfully I get paid to play. And so I wake up and I do no different than my 6-year-old. As I go, okay, what do I want to play with today that will maximize the amount of money and maximize the amount of enjoyment that I get? And it seems like it's sufficient enough why. but it's not very clever. Are you similar? Or are you just talking?
That's a good question. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's the way my mind operates around it. It's that I'm looking just more on.
So why get up and go to work?
I'm passionate about helping people.
Okay.
And I'm very interested in the relationships.
Okay.
And just getting to know someone better. I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast.
Yeah.
Is for me to build a relationship with someone who I didn't like. We've talked a time or two, but we don't have a relationship. Maybe we do now.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe this will also help other people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're going to say things that maybe you haven't said before on a show, or maybe you have, but I'm going to get to know you better.
Yeah.
They're going to get to know you better. And owning a brokerage, being in real estate, I went to Purdue. My degrees are in economics and in communications with minors in management and psychology. And I always thought, what the hell am I going to do with this hot mess? But I ended up doing something that somehow all four things are utilized daily.
Yeah, true.
And so it's really just continuing to build something, make Highgarden better, make the world better, help people's lives. You mentioned something earlier about how, it was earlier in the conversation, but then you even touched on it here a little bit ago about one of the reasons you're doing this is to set your family up for success too. And so when I think about my why, or like what could I really do to make a difference, I do think farther enough ahead where hopefully I can build something that is protected and secure for not just my kids, but my grandkids and maybe their kids. And like at some point, something that's far enough out in the future where I still can touch it and feel it and understand it. And that I've helped make their lives a little bit easier.
Yeah.
We don't know how, the world, we've been really fortunate the last. Of
course.
I'm 52. We've been really fortunate in my 52 years that there hasn't been a World War III.
Yeah.
COVID ended up being kind of a fizzle. But it could have been something.
Could have been a lot.
Could have been something that was terrible.
Yeah.
And so protecting them.
Okay.
And making sure that they have every opportunity and every advantage when it comes to life, because life's hard.
Yeah.
How is having you have one child?
Yep.
And how's having a 6-year-old, his son, right?
Yep.
Is his name Hudson? Did I read that?
Yep. Yep.
How's that changed all this?
A lot. I was a really good parent when I wasn't a parent. I could tell you how you should. I knew exactly what you should do.
Are you less cocky than you used to be?
Probably.
I don't know.
Yeah,
people say that about you. I'm not saying.
Of course. I hear all kinds of fun things about me, for sure.
Well, I'm not saying they're saying that, although maybe people have. But the way you said that now, do you feel? Are you saying having Hudson has humbled you to some extent?
I don't know if that's been the catalyst of the humility component. I think probably that the humility component could be enough therapy and leadership and probably like spirituality, some combination of those. About like my wife is so chill and way nicer and better than I deserve, and that probably has some component as well. Being a parent takes some edge off as well. But it's interesting, kind of like what I think what's been, I don't know if that's been the catalyst for change. I hired a new coach recently, and he had me like fill out this worksheet before we started, and it was like, what's the one regret that you want to avoid? And it was really clear to me the single regret to avoid was failing my family. I don't know why, but nothing seemed more humiliating and just that I had failed the singular objective and singular mandate that I had to do, which was to ensure that I had done the best job daily providing for my family, and to have either squandered that opportunity or failed in preserving or securing the ability to provide seemed like about the largest regret that I could have. And so when I keep that in context, I think it becomes easier. What's interesting though too is, now that you mentioned that about the humility component, is one thing I found that's helped is not selling real estate.
Okay. Wow.
I didn't realize what an asshole that I can be when I sell, frankly, until I was helping Lauren the other day with something, and I was helping her with this transaction, and at the end of the day, one of the main things I love about real estate is actually the consumer. I'm passionate about home ownership, and I'm passionate about the different life that your environment provides for you. I believe we're all a product of our environment. So if we get the ability to help someone improve their environment, we are genuinely helping to shape their life, because we are our environment. And so we were helping this family with, they had 4 adult children who had special needs in some capacity. And Lauren's in this transaction, and it's like a first right contingency or something. They withdraw the first right, so it's expected to go to closing. Somehow the closing gets delayed 5 days or something. The other agent, the listing agent, doesn't sign the extension weeks prior and continues to kick the can down the road on signing the extension. And like 4 days before closing goes, sorry, we sold the house to someone else because the house was going to be out of contract. And in my mind, we're fortunate that we don't need that closing, thankfully, because I had enough success selling real estate to not need it from a financial standpoint. So I don't go to like what's in it for me.
Right.
My mind goes to, we made a promise to a family, and we had a promise to 4 people that we would protect their best interests, and we would advocate on their behalf to ensure that through all the complexities of life, that they were able to move into an environment where they could have a better future. And whether it was our fault or someone else's, we failed them in that obligation. And I got fired up about it. And so in that particular instance, I realized that I have a very different approach in that scenario. So when I'm selling real estate, then in leadership, it's a very different dichotomy, because I take the responsibility very differently. And you realize that you're dealing with some different variables. I can detach from the outcome of that particular property and that promise, but the stakes, I think, are different. And so as a result of it, I realized that I probably was way more of an asshole in that capacity, because frankly, it was like one transaction and my entire demeanor was very different just in that singular event than how I act on a daily basis. Also, as you know, if you're going to maintain relationships with agents or with people for a long time, then you typically have to scale the intensity back, especially with real estate agents. And
they can talk about how great of an agent you are to work with, or how you're not.
Yeah.
And when they're deciding whose offer to accept.
Yeah, there's that piece too. There's that, but I mean, I'm also thinking from the brokerage and leadership side, right? Is that that it's interesting because there's this unique dynamic, this fluid dynamic of they're both, as a broker owner, their agents are both your customer, but they're also kind of your business partner.
Yeah.
And so there's this odd dynamic between them where being too strong loses your customers, lacking the strength also then loses them from a lack of leadership. So trying to figure out where the right balance in between has been something I've tried to learn and failed at.
That's not easy.
No.
Because they're all different.
Yeah.
Managing agents or helping agents really is quite the trick, because they're all independent contractors and they all want to do their own thing, except for a lot of them want to be part of something bigger. But helping one to get to here versus the other to get to there, it requires oftentimes just so many different tools and so many different methodologies.
But and have you noticed that the marketplace has started to change a little bit of that? As in, like, when the market was really strong 2 or 3 years ago, agents had a different mentality. They wanted to be more a part of something. It was easier to be distracted. Whereas today, I'm starting to, I think, find that they have to maintain their focus on generating revenue, which means I might have to show up differently with them. Do you encounter the same thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely think more than ever for us at High Garden, we are focused on culture and people that want to be part of something bigger. So it's a big part. That's a growing part of our conversation. But the stress of not selling as much as needed, that hasn't been any good the last 2.5, 3 years. That's a growing part too. And so, where interest rates being elevated, it helps in certain parts of our industry in terms of building inventory and helping the overall health of the market. It's also hurting the overall sales. And so what our agents need and what we need as an industry for a lot of the people that you're talking about, mid-tier people, not to be compressed, is to have more opportunity that comes their way by more turnover, and people are just not selling their house.
Correct.
And so I do think there's more pressure and stress than there has been in a few years. But I mean, compare that to the first month of COVID, compare that to the great financial crisis, the 07 crash. Yeah. I mean, this is a blip compared to that.
Yeah.
But
well, it's interesting because what I've found is that this is why I said I wasn't owning and operating a brokerage was probably the hardest thing that I've done, because to your point is you've got an entire microcosm of the industry and of society in a brokerage, whereas in my role now it's team specific. There's a little less variance in personalities when dealing with teams.
That makes sense.
And so that piece is probably why it's been a little easier for me. I understand myself better than I understood everyone at a general pop brokerage. But what's interesting, we've started to find is that the people who were like, we love the company because of culture, have actually been the ones who have ended up leaving because they no longer could generate enough income to stay.
If they want to look at the brokerage as a social club, or
some people do.
And if that's the case, absolutely.
Or because they're like, we love it here because you call and you comment on my social media, or because we do events, or there's a lot of things that people like when times are good. Yeah. That they forget when times are not good. The job is still actually helping people buy or sell real estate. The fun happens after that. And that's been an interesting dichotomy that somehow our industry has lost sight of a lot, because it's hard to scale a brokerage, for one, if the only thing that you focus on is selling enough real estate. There probably aren't enough agents that feel like they're a part of something. So it's that finding out the balance between production and not fun, but production and everything else that is difficult. Have you mastered that or figured out where the dynamic of that is?
And no one's mastered anything in this business. I don't. No, there's no mastery, but there's a balance, and the balance is just being there for people when they need you.
Okay.
And that's at least that's my approach. And not that I won't be proactive and reach out to people that I think need to be reached out to, but when you need help, we're here for you. And we're supportive, and we're going to make sure you have, if you fail, it won't be because we weren't there to help you.
Yeah.
It will be because you decided that you didn't want to put in the time and the effort and the consistency.
Did you tell them that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I find some people are a little too afraid to poke people in the eye sometimes like that. It's just funny because your grandma...
Tell them that up front.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, before we even decide to hire them, it's like... Now, there's some people that are walking in the door. They've proven they're already, but if they're not already proven, we can't want it more than you do.
Yeah.
If that's the case, this will not work.
For sure. it's interesting. Tyler and I, we met with, I don't know do you know Mo Anderson, who Mo Anderson is?
I know the name, but don't.
Yeah, so Mo's got an interesting story. She's almost 87, but she joined Keller Williams. She was the CEO that took over, replaced Gary. And the interesting thing is the company had like 2,700 people and was not profitable at the time. Gary's main office was profitable, but the rest of the market centers were not.
Yeah.
And so Mo takes over in her late 50s, and she's this like Southern woman who, she's the Southern version of your grandma, and she's just super prim and proper looking and very professional. And I mean, the most intense person that I've interacted with. We had a chance to spend a little bit of time with her in February, and she was so savage. It was amazing. And what was so awesome about it was, she starts going through the list of the company's like mission and vision, and in my head I'm like, really, we've got an hour with this woman who took the company that was losing money and 2,000 agents and took it to 160,000 worldwide, and you're like, we're going to talk about the decals on the halls of the office. You're going to walk us through word by word. And so I'm telling myself this story about how annoyed and frustrated I am that this is how we're spending the hour that we get. And we get to one of them that says, now, what is a business worth owning? And then because it's, business worth owning, careers worth having. And so she's like, okay, what's a business worth owning? And I don't know. I've got some good answer that I assume is going to be close enough to accurate and that's going to satisfy her to keep moving on. And she's like, no, the only business worth owning is a profitable one. Now say it like you mean it. Profit. Like, do you feel it? Say it like you mean it. And I mean, then we spend the next 45 minutes and she is hammering us with the fact that the only career that's worth having is profit. The only business worth owning is a profitable one. And when you make peace with all of those things, then you get to do everything else that you want to do, which is, she went and then rebuilt the town that she lived in Edmond, Oklahoma, and has done so much charitable work. But it was just so fascinating to see the fact that here's a woman who's 87 is more on fire for real estate and for business building than most people who are, a quarter of her age. And she's super clear that it is production and profit. And once the business is done, now we get to do all the fun stuff. But we don't get to have fun until we get the business done. And so I found that that's been an interesting piece that it seems like is missing a lot from our industry lately, that she was wildly clear on.
Well, you mentioned fun here a couple times, and you also are a self-diagnosed workaholic. So what are you doing for fun? When do you have time for fun? Yeah. What do you do?
Usually my wife and I go on a date. Try to go at least one night every week. Anything that I can do with her is fun. So whatever that entails is fun. Doesn't really matter. That might be, I don't know. Gosh, we do some pretty nerd things. Like last week we watched a History Channel documentary, The Battles of BC. That's an exciting one. We go to dinner and travel.
I would enjoy it.
Yeah, it was good. She suffered through it at least. So anything I do with her, I enjoy. I like hanging out with friends. I talk to people a lot. I probably have a few hours of phone conversations a day, every day, usually with people in the industry. I like to think of it as a kid, I used to play pickup basketball in a gravel driveway with a spotlight, with a goal on the side of a barn, and we would stay out until our parents finally made us stop playing pickup ball in the driveway. And today I do the same thing with business and real estate, and I do that with my friends. It just happens on the phone. We're talking, we're slapping the ball around at 7:00 at night, masterminding business or different ways to improve our life, improve business. And
so what you're saying is you're such a workaholic when you're playing and having fun at night.
It's don't work.
Yeah,
it's the same thing. I mean, it's
and it isn't work, is really what you're
it's
saying.
Correct. It's not. I mean, probably our wedding, I got married a couple of years ago, and that's probably the only time that as an adult when I've done zero work related, and super intentional about that. Of course, that was, no podcasts. Like, I got a new phone. I didn't do anything business related, no email.
For one whole day?
Nothing. No, it was 2 weeks.
Oh, just checking.
20 days, something like that.
What was that like, by the way?
It was amazing. It was great. It was awesome.
How hard was it to get restarted?
It wasn't hard for me. It was hard for my wife, though. It was a lot harder for her than it was for me. I don't know. It was easy to come back and just go again. Yeah, I don't know if I was. I probably could have done another 20 days or something. We had a ton of fun. I mean, like I said, the most fun thing I do is hang out with my wife. So spending, almost 3 weeks with no work and no distractions and hanging out on a beach in Hawaii for 3 weeks was good. But I was that way, and I started as a kid, as a 10-year-old. I started in radio and TV.
Yeah.
And I remember watching basketball games and wanting to be Marv Albert. That was before, like, he was, wearing women's underwear and stuff. So, that Marv Albert. And so to some degree, I think even as a little kid, I've always enjoyed what people would consider to be work. So it was radio and TV first, and then I got into sales and still would do a lot of sales and business adjacent work. Today, I still do sales and business adjacent work for fun. If I had to do something, if I didn't have to work tomorrow, I would still listen to the Business Wars podcast. I still find that entertaining. I still enjoy learning, and I like to write, and all those things are play. They just so happen that I get paid to do them as well.
You like music?
No. Although, you know what? This is the best AI thing that I've done, Steve, is write rap lyrics lately with Suno AI.
I'm familiar with it.
Right. Okay. So lately I've found way too much time and energy on writing ridiculous rap.
Are you saying you listen to rap when you do listen to music?
I don't actually listen to music very much at all.
Okay.
I will listen to music some if I have to focus on something and be really
as background.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll listen to, but I don't know. I it's kind of silly. I can't hear lyrics for whatever reason. Are you like that?
No, I mean, I would say that I'm listening to the music more than I know plenty of people that it's all about the lyrics.
Yes.
And I appreciate that. And
yeah.
Some songs but for me, it's the groove. And I love music. I mean, podcasts have taken so much time away from reading and from listening to music for me. But it's very important to me to never get too far away from music because it's kind of my lifeblood.
You should try your hand at writing rap lyrics now. That's what you should do instead then.
Well, I'll work out. I'm a little bit more into rock than rap.
Well, see, there you go. You could do the
I
same
was
thing.
at the Run DMC concert in 1987. Public Enemy opened for him. So I guess I've been around for rap for a while.
You could just in Suno, you could do 1990s hip hop and it'll spit out something that might sound like Run DMC. It's been a scary, guilty pleasure lately.
Wow. More to come on AI guilty pleasures. Eric, it's been awesome.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you having a conversation with me.
Thanks, you as well.